People often say that Linux is not for creatives, but there are lots of talented Linux YouTubers out there who make great content on a regular basis. So I've decided to ask them what gear do they use and what software they prefer to make their videos, and what's more importantly, which OS is installed on their main production machine. The main goal of this video is to show how much value Linux YouTubers actually pour into their content, and also to inspire a new generation of creators by showing them what they can create on Linux using both free and proprietary software. So let's get started.
Here we have a phone, and with it I can show you my setup. Basically all of my videos are being recorded with a Canon EOS M. I bought it like 4 or 5 years ago. It does a good enough job. Attached to it is a Sigma 16mm 1.4 lens. I am not a camera guy, I just bought it because I knew it was a good thing to buy. Now to stream and capture with that is being attached to an Elgato Camlink 4K, which works absolutely perfectly on Linux. As for my audio setup, here we have a Shure SM7B. This is attached to a Cloud Lifter, which is then attached to a Yamaha MG10XU, which is way overkill for what I'm doing, but it gives me room for expansion that I just don't use. For my gaming streams, I also have an EVGA XR1 Lite. This is OBS certified and also works absolutely perfectly on Linux. It's not the greatest of capture cards, it doesn't have like HDR pass-through and things like that, but for what I'm doing, it works great. Right now my desktop is KDE Plasma. In the near future, it's probably going to be Cosmic. On this, I'm using Kdenlive to edit my videos, I'm using GIMP to make my thumbnails, and of course, I'm using Arch Linux. I also have a triple monitor setup. I'm a vertical monitor enjoyer, and one of my monitors is basically a glorified teleprompter. And since I know somebody is going to ask, let me grab something. Here is an Iron Mouse Nendoroid.
I use a mirrorless camera from Sony for all of my A-roll footage. It's the A6100, which, by the way, is a newer camera than the A6300 because Sony likes to make things confusing, I guess. For my audio, I use a Rode Pod mic that is connected through an XLR to my Rodecaster Pro 2. The Pod mic is a very good microphone for anyone who wants an XLR mic. I got this one for about $100. The mixer, on the other hand, is fantastic, but it's much more expensive. I've had many mixers over the years, but the Rodecaster Pro 2 is easily the best mixer that I have ever used to create content. I use an Elgato Camlink to connect my camera to the computer, and while Elgato is not known for being Linux friendly, the Camlink uses universal protocols, and thanks to that, the Camlinks work out of the box just fine, plug and play, all that good stuff. The process I use is different depending on the content I'm making. So how I record Twill, for example, I use OBS to record the show, and other times I just record A-roll on my camera, and then I record the audio directly into my system or directly on the Rodecaster. Now, for making thumbnails, I use Photopea, PEA. So Photopea.com is a Photoshop alternative that works in Linux because it's a web app and all you need is a browser. It offers a ton of great features and even some professional level features like non-destructive editing. Now, my video editor of choice is DaVinci Resolve. It does work on Linux. There's a little bit of hoops you have to jump through, but you can make it work, and that's awesome. With that said, my main production machine is for making content, so of course, I have a particular distro that I use for that. And by particular, I mean 4 of them. It's a quadruple boot between Fedora KDE, Kubuntu, EndeavourOS KDE, and Linux Mint Cinnamon. I use this FlexiDock, which lets me boot multiple distros as long as I have enough SSDs. And I tend to have quite a few. This means that my production machine is also my test machine and my gaming machine, and whatever else. That's the beauty of having a portable setup. I just switch the drive for what I want to do at that given time. I'm currently recording this particular video on the Linux Mint Cinnamon, but I could do it on any of them. Just sometimes I like to mess around with different distros.
Hi friends, my name is Tris. Every day I write electronic music, fast technical videos, and produce podcasts all on Linux on whatever hardware is within reach. If there is one thing I do all day, every day, it's write. I started out writing Lost Terminal in Emacs org mode, a delightfully nerdy and powerful system for building a knowledge platform. However, after a year, I discovered Obsidian, thanks to CGP Grey and Mike Hurley's productivity-focused podcast, Cortex. Obsidian is a Markdown-based note-taking, knowledge management, everything app, and I was hooked from the start. My most popular video, at 2 million views at the time of writing, is an intro to Obsidian. Here's the link, but you don't currently need it. Just search YouTube for Obsidian and order by views. I don't know how that happened. Obsidian is incredible. I made the slides you're looking at right now using it. Any computer hardware that can run Obsidian and my lightweight audio-video editor Reaper, I can work on. Let me start with the production PC. My main editing and gaming PC is currently built around an AMD Ryzen 7950X with 32 gigs of RAM, which I plan to double in a few months, and an AMD 5700 XT that I traded my old equivalent NVIDIA card for. I would love for the Rode NT1 V5 USB 32-bit floating point mic to work for me, but I just prefer how I sound out of the ubiquitous SM7B. I spent years trying every mic but the 7B, thinking it was cliched or boring. 6 months ago, I realized that those are just synonyms for industry standard, and now happily use it for recording onto a Zoom H4 Essential in 32-bit float sampling. I type all day, so even tiny increases in comfort are worthwhile for me. I own 2 Moonlanders and their latest lightweight portable version, Voyager. The Moonlander is the perfect keyboard. Save up and buy it, your hands will thank you. My music production hardware is simple, a Yamaha AG06 USB interface for connecting weird, cheap eBay synths to, and a Launchpad Mini Mark III for controlling my music production software. For on-the-go writing and coding, I have a 2-year-old ThinkPad X13 Yoga. In the mornings, I write for 2 hours on a 2019 Samsung Galaxy Tab S6, the earliest Samsung tablet with pen support, on which I've removed or disabled every app except for Obsidian. This is my distraction-free environment. I use almost exclusively open-source, Linux-based software. I'm a sort of open-source pragmatist in this regard. I run as much open source as I can, but I also don't lose sight of practicality or interoperability and longevity of my data. For music, I use Bitwig and Ableton Live Clone, which launched in 2014 with Linux support and allowed me in a single stroke to finally leave music production on Windows behind me. I have happily paid the license every year since then. Companies building professional-grade software for Linux get my money. And about 3 years ago, I rediscovered the dark horse that is Reaper, which is the best audio editor I've ever heard of, let alone used. It's got more features than every other expensive commercial editor combined, and the only reason I think it is less well known than it should be is that it looked like it was made for Windows 95. Reaper also edits video, doing everything I need it to do on there too. The biggest feature that surprises video producers I talk to is that Reaper never crashes. Weird and slightly concerning that should be an impressive feature. Thanks to my standardization on Linux and mostly open source tools, I am not held back by my hardware or software. I could do all my coding and production on a Raspberry Pi powered by a solar panel. As someone who now pays the bills with my creative output, this allows me to sleep at night very, very soundly. Thanks, Pavel.
I'm shooting myself with Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K and color grade my footage in DaVinci Resolve. The camera is connected to the old TV which I use to monitor my performance. To capture audio, I have this wonderful Audio-Technica 875R, the mic is plugged into Focusrite Scarlett Solo and the signal goes to my studio laptop via USB. All my best takes are being edited and compiled together in Reaper, and then I sync audio in post in DaVinci Resolve. I use Arch Linux on my main production machine and it works flawlessly.
I use Debian, and instead of a full desktop environment, I use a window manager, DWM. Since I don't use a camera and I'm generally showing something like a terminal or a script or something like that, I use Tilix for my terminal, and I use Genie, which is what you're seeing here, as my text editor. With regard to hardware and software, I do use OBS, but I have a 2-machine setup. So I have my production machine, which you're going to see here, and then I have my test machine. And the way it works is I have my test machine and then pass the video to my production machine, and I do that by using an Elgato HD60S+. With audio, I have a Shure MV7 USB microphone, which passes to this Universal Audio Volt 176. There's only one input on this, and that's all I need. Now here's where I deviate from most people. Most people will do their whole video and then edit it in something like Kdenlive. I don't. I actually record very small segments, and do that in MKV format. And then I just use command line to merge all of those MKV files into one file by using this type of command. So when I do that, boom, it strings everything together, and then it actually just becomes one file out of all these segments. And that's how I do it.
Daily driving Linux is a thing that not that many consider, yet it's entirely possible. This right here is my little server rack, which features a Proxmox virtualization host that runs all my Debian file and project servers. It's basically just a regular PC, except with a huge HDD disk array and an AMD APU. Above my server is my production and gaming PC, which powers my two 144Hz monitors via two optical DisplayPort cables, as well as my Logitech G303 keyboard and Stream Deck via an Ethernet KVM extender. Hardware-wise, it's nothing fancy. A Ryzen 5 5600X, 32GB of RAM and an AMD RX 6800 XT, since AMD GPUs tend to perform better on Linux than Nvidia's, with some caveats. My operating system on both my Microsoft Surface and main PC is currently Fedora 40 with GNOME 46. I basically use GNOME as it comes out of the box and only added a clipboard extension, Blur My Shell and Vitals on my Surface. All my videos are being recorded via an Elgato Camlink and OBS Studio. My camera is a Sony Alpha 7 III with Sony's default 16-50mm lens, but I also sometimes change it for the static 50mm lens, which has a lower aperture. My current audio interface is a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2, which works on Linux out of the box due to its USB class compliance. For editing, I use the Studio Edition of DaVinci Resolve, and for my thumbnails I use GIMP, which I have basically been using since forever. And what can I say, except it just works.
My name's Isaac Dowling, and my niche is basically just making videos about whatever technology thing interested me that week, and it just so happens that often involves Linux, not Windows. But that means I spend a lot more time trying weird pieces of software than actually making the videos themselves. And because of that, and how it goes wrong sometimes, I place a lot of value in my setup being as easy as possible to refresh and reinstall. Which means one, I have setup scripts so I can take a fresh install and make them into my environment really quickly, basically completely automatically. But secondly, I try to make sure that I don't need to reinstall by keeping things separated, organized, and containerized, which is why my distros of choice are Fedora Server and Arch Linux. So I have an Arch distro box, and that's where my software development and just messing with weird software happens, and it won't affect my Fedora host. And on that, I only install my window manager and the very, very basic things, and everything else is done through Flatpaks. That way, I can not worry about having stacks and stacks of old config files polluting my home directory, or having tons of old programs and their dependencies and having to sort those out. Like, that kind of thing was why I used to reinstall my OS every few months on Windows, because it just annoyed me, and I don't have to deal with that anymore thanks to things like DistroBox and Flatpak. On the topic of Flatpaks, besides Steam, the only piece of proprietary software that I've got on that OS is DaVinci Resolve, and I love it. And yes, there is a way to Flatpak it, and it's on GitHub, and it's brilliant. If you use Resolve, I highly suggest it. But besides that, it's all free and open source, be it LibreOffice for writing, OBS for screen cap, or if you feel like counting it since Android is kind of Linux, OpenCamera. Obviously, if I had a way higher budget, I would love to shoot on like a used A7S II or something. But if my budget is here, the kind of price range of those things are way up here. So I try to get the most out of using my phone by using manual settings. Plus, shooting on my phone gives me a few little extra benefits that maybe make it not so bad, like being able to use local send to send files between my phone to my computer, where I can convert them to ProRes for FFmpeg for Resolve to use. And that means I never have to touch SD cards, which is great. If you want to get a little bit wider with my setup, I guess you could say my lights are open source. I use WLED, which makes it really convenient to turn them on or off, though I also use a not open source, but also it has no software, warm white LED bar sometimes as well. I record onto a Zoom H2, which is actually, I lied about not needing an SD card. I've got a 1 gig SD card in there, so I do actually need to touch an SD card sometimes. And although normally all of the footage I shoot would be going onto my all AMD desktop computer for editing and reviewing viewing and that kind of thing. I do have a laptop with an NVIDIA GPU, a GTX 1060, and power management, like the drivers are a mess on that. I've got a whole page on GitLab about how I make the power management right and how I just kludge things together hoping that they work, and they just barely do. But I like to think that that just emphasizes that, yeah, a lot of my setup seems kind of hacked together and done awkwardly, but in the end, I like messing with things and it works, so hopefully you found something interesting here too.
Hey guys, it's Craig from Linux Creative Project. I'm going to give you a quick tour of my setup, including my equipment, Linux distro I use, and some of the software I rely on to make my videos and do all the creative stuff that I do. On the desk, I have basically two computer systems that I bounce between. The main one, for the past few months, as you know, is my Linux system. And that is running off of this little Kamui mini PC. Basically using it to test the waters of Linux and to see if I could do what I wanted to do. I also, buried under these books, I have a Mac Mini just to help me make this transition, because I still have a lot of Mac stuff. I have almost 25 years of Mac files, Mac projects that, yeah, it's just hard to cut that off cold turkey. So right now that's my DaVinci Resolve workstation, since I can't run Resolve on this little mini PC yet. And then I have a MIDI audio keyboard for making some cool sounds in some music software that I use. Right now it's Ardor, Waveform, and Reaper. I'm bouncing between those three. That's a Native Instruments Complete M32, I think it's called. And then for my actual computer keyboard is Keychron. It's the K3 Pro, I think it's called. I actually don't remember the names of these things, but it's fantastic. Most of my USB devices running through the monitor acts as the USB hub. And then all I have to do is switch one cable to switch from my Mac system to my Linux system, and then almost everything here switches instantly and is recognizable instantly. The rest of my hardware is a couple external hard drives, one for my Mac, one for my Linux system, and then I have this Volt 2 audio interface that I use to record audio. And then I have this little microphone that you've seen in my videos. This is the little camera I've been using. This is my everything camera, my photography camera, my video camera. It's a Fujifilm X-H1. Usually it sits on that tripod over there when I'm filming my YouTube videos. I have a photography channel. I've talked about this stuff before on that channel. But I love these Fujifilm cameras, especially this X-H1. Fantastic. I might bounce around to some other brands and experiment a bit, but that's what I'm using right now. Photography-wise, my main piece of software is Darktable. Darktable is great because for me, it pretty much does everything that I needed to get out of Lightroom. So it's a fantastic Lightroom replacement for me, meaning that it helps organize my whole photo library. It helps me edit and organize all in one, which is what I always loved about Lightroom. One of the other key pieces of software that I rely on for my channel is Inkscape. So Inkscape is my Illustrator replacement or Affinity Designer replacement to help create thumbnails and logos and all this stuff. So this is a thumbnail project that I used to create my last thumbnail. And yeah, it's just like Kdenlive, it's a fantastic piece of software. It's kind of unbelievable that it's open source. But I think that's pretty much it. It's a relatively basic setup. Obviously, when you're a creator, you have all these extra accessories that a lot of people don't need. But the cool thing I've found with Linux is that most of this stuff has worked pretty well. I've been running Linux Mint. It's been working great for me. And then that's pretty much it. A lot of the other stuff is interchangeable, like hard drive brands and things like that. And yeah, that's it for now. And I hope to do these kind of things again soon. So talk to you guys soon.
Okay, so how do I do videos? Well, I haven't made one in months, but I'm currently in a restructuring process and hopefully I will soon be back. But still, let's start with the camera. It's a Fujifilm X-T3, which I'm very proud of. The lens is a 50mm equivalent. I usually use it like wide open, but now with the new background, I stop it down a few steps. Then I have, of course, my teleprompter, which is some random teleprompter. I used to use the Steam Deck as the device to actually do the reflecting, but now I've actually detached a screen from somewhere else and attached it with duct tape, and that works, I guess. So that is camera. And then of course there's the microphone, which is a Samson Q2AOU. I don't remember. It's pretty cheap, less than $100 and works
amazingly well. I've got no soundproofing whatsoever. This is a dynamic microphone, it just doesn't care, works unless I screw it up. Then lights, I've got these couple of lights which are just props, I just like them. And then for actual lighting, I've got an Elgato Key Light Air something, and their branding, and then just a normal LED RGB light bulb over there with some diffuser, very cheap stuff actually. Again, I'm in the process of restructuring things a bit. So this is it as far as actually recording is involved, and then of course I record audio either with Audacity and do a native video recording on camera. That's how I used to do videos, but nowadays I think I'm just gonna go with OBS, and then I actually do the live editing on OBS through a little command thing, I don't know how they're called, to actually switch between images and stuff like that. But I'm also working on a Python script for OBS and a JavaScript script for QPrompt, which is my teleprompter app, so that the JavaScript script reads the prompter location, tells it to the Python script in OBS, which changes the images automatically so that I don't have to, and that I can just pick. That would be awesome. I'm still working on it, so it's quite a complex setup for me to set up every time, but whatever works, I guess.
And that's it. Thanks to everyone who agreed to take part in this video. This was Reluctant Anarchist, and I have nothing left to say.